it was incomplete. The Heart Sutra. Part 1. Author: Kufudo. Translator: Masaki Akiyama. Introduction. Nobody can understand the Heart Sutra except those who have been spiritually awakened. These are the words of Master Musa Hisagoi, the founder of Byaku Shinkokai and World Peace Prayer Society, who was my mentor for spiritual guidance. A number of people have certainly attempted to decipher the Heart Sutra in the past. However, as far as I know, most of interpretations in the world are filled with quite nihilistic content, just enumerating meaningless examples such as, that is nothing, this is also nothing. Above all, most of their interpretations cannot distinguish nothing from emptiness. Therefore, the situation surrounding the Heart Sutra has become confused beyond control. Other interpretations also cannot draw a unified overall picture of the Heart Sutra because they just interpret only a part of the scripture. Partially their interpretations make sense, but are inconsistent as a whole with many contradictions. In fact, the Heart Sutra has been in such a chaotic state for roughly 2,000 years. Within such a background, the author showed the result of interpretation of the Heart Sutra successfully based on his past experience and spiritual awakening, referred to here on as just awakening. This book is quite valuable because it enables us to escape the chaotic situation. The author is certain that the content of this book has become very profound because the author could show quite a specific and well-ordered picture of the cosmos that is finely consistent, without contradiction, and also could indicate the way to lead people to a certain enlightenment while clarifying the relationship between the cosmos and human beings. The author will explain the precious conclusion, which has been deciphered specifically and logically in this book as far as the paper permits. The author will reveal in the final part of this book that the Heart Sutra is still incomplete. The incomplete part of the Heart Sutra will be clarified in this book and finally completed by adding Chapter of Completion. The title of this book derives from this background. The Heart Sutra is one of the most famous scriptures in Buddhism, and it is difficult to find a person who is not familiar with the name of this scripture. However, nobody other than the author could reveal the real meaning of the Heart Sutra. One which is true and never false. I was born on the 4th of February, 1943, and have always been searching for the way to clarify man and the cosmos because I was eager to discover this since childhood. I am not a serious Buddhist. However, in my parents' house, an old-fashioned Japanese-style one, there was a Buddhist altar next to a Shinto shrine and the family's Buddhist altar room next to a Shoinzukuri-style room. When I was a child, I frequently heard my mother chanting the Heart Sutra in front of the Buddhist altar and felt familiar with it. Time passed. I learned physics at a university and after graduation studied electronic engineering and cerebral physiology at a national institute for 11 years. I have lived as an academic researcher with the research theme of information processing mechanism of the human visual system. When I was 27 years old, the guidance by great guardian spirits has started in such a way that they responded to my feelings to seek the truth sincerely and gave me a training name, Kufudo. After that, I have attained spiritual awakening at last after accumulating ascetic practice, not by retiring to a mountain retreat, but by staying in the real world. During this spiritual training period, I received the 4 main revelations concerning the future of mankind and my own mission along the will of great guardian spirits. While living as one of social members, I can say in retrospect that I have had a rare experience to have achieved these revelations one by one and still continue with the spiritual and practical activities related to the future of mankind. The author was never satisfied with only his own enlightenment. He believed that the practice of truth suitable for him was to make the most of his experience of enlightenment to real society without going into religious activities since he dislikes discrepancies of religions. After retiring from institutional work within his university, the author has continuously deepened his spiritual training without retreating to the mountains and founded a private laboratory with a vow to keep a direct relationship with society, and this continues on to this day. In the laboratory, the author has engaged in the development of basic technologies related to artificial intelligence such as image processing, 3D maps, self-positioning, and recognition technology for over 30 years. In recent years, the author has been deeply involved in the Heart Sutra while continuing to engage in society in the positions of researcher and chief executive officer of his company. In retrospect, everything in my history was based on the motivation that I was eager to know about man and the cosmos. While accumulating experiences of spiritual practice, I am sure that I was able to explore the truth universally and express it objectively because I had a scientist's language and logical thinking. My ascetic practice to clarify man and the cosmos started when I was in my mid-20s. It has been a long and hard way for me, however. The author is currently writing this book after obtaining the reliable answer after half a lifetime. The Heart Sutra arose during Buddhism confusion. After Buddha entered Nirvana, Buddhism fell into large confusion. However, people gathered with the hope of reconstructing Buddhism. Mahayanist Buddhism arose at that time around thus sympathetic people after an enlightened person appeared. In Mahayanist Buddhism, a universal view, which had never existed before, was built and a system of thought around emptiness was produced. In this book, the author will make it a rule to describe the new view of the world preached in the Heart Sutra as the view of the world. Therefore, if one tries to interpret it within the doctrine of conventional initial Buddhism, one can never build an effective view of the cosmos that makes sense and will be puzzled at the immediate failure of interpretation. In fact, we cannot find anything in most interpretations of the Heart Sutra in the world that can be regarded as a view of the world. They cannot step out of the superficial interpretation of words and phrases and fail to represent the overall picture without blurring due to the bias to partial interpretations. We cannot come across any commentary among them convincing enough to reach readers at the bottom of their hearts. Nevertheless, the Heart Sutra has survived in history for nearly 2,000 years, without being deciphered and with its meaning remaining unknown. However, once the author deciphered the Heart Sutra through his own experience of enlightenment, accumulated contemporary intelligence, and the integration of the both, one can find the system of thoughts coming up, which was described perfectly to lead people to salvation. The overall picture is shown quite clearly with an admirable configuration that makes sense, and its details are also written consistently without contradiction. While keeping the continuity of initial Buddhism, the Heart Sutra preaches the grand view of the world by introducing a new concept and represents the cosmic structure and relationship between man and the cosmos using a thorough technique of logic. Therefore, you need to pay attention to the following points when you accept the new interpretation of this book without sticking to past wrong interpretations. Since the core part of the Heart Sutra, that is, Chapter 3, 4 and 5, are originally extremely logical expressions, this book that deciphered them must also become logical inevitably. If you lose sight of the assembly of chapter-based logic, you will immediately miss the flow of logic. Therefore, the author would like to recommend readers to read this book in order without skipping forward. Then, the splendidly organized, beautiful overall picture of the Heart Sutra should definitely be visible to everyone. Prologue. The reason why the Heart Sutra became complicated. There are some reasons why the Heart Sutra has become so difficult and meaningless. The first reason is the difficulty of the sentence structure of the three basic natures of emptiness, that is, beings which are neither generated nor disappear, beings which are neither impure nor apart from impure, and beings which do not increase nor decrease. Even though an important and precise content that is equivalent to modern mathematical logic is hidden in this sutra, all the conventional interpretations have fallen into a nihilistic interpretation. Unfortunately, the total meaning of the Heart Sutra cannot be constructed at all filled with contradiction, because a serious mistranslation that emptiness has no substance was made without deepening this sentence structure. In short, many translators have fallen into an easy interpretation of a series of negative sentences, expressly. Emptiness never occurs or disappears because it has no substance. Emptiness never becomes dirty or pure because it has no substance. And emptiness never increases or decreases because it has no substance. We must say that this interpretation has become forcible quibble or reckless logic, rather like 0 is always 0 even when any figure is multiplied by 0. This is a fatal mistranslation carelessly made in terms of the most essential sentence. Since then, the Heart Sutra filled with emptiness without substance has been unfortunately disseminated to the world. First of all, anybody who tries to decipher the Heart Sutra must analyze the structure of these three paired phrases thoroughly. In short, one should clarify the following four reasons. Why the compilers of the Heart Sutra selected the three paired phrases. Why they described the words with opposite meanings as pairs. Why they arranged as many as three paired phrases and negated the meaning of each paired words at the same time. Furthermore, why only these three pairs are enough. Those who persist on the conventional theory of emptiness without substance must answer these four presented questions reasonably without contradiction. To tell the truth, the theory of non-existence is rather common sense to atheists or materialists and does not deserve deliberation. The Heart Sutra would become a worthless scripture if it bothers to preach such commonplace theories at this late hour. Historically, there are a number of religions around the world, however, there are never any which preach that there is ultimately nothing in the cosmos. The fact that the dogma emptiness without substance has spread so widely shows the significant evidence that this time period is the latter days of this world. The Heart Sutra, which has been disseminated in the world with quite a nihilistic view, was completely restored and became the original Heart Sutra that preaches the ultimate view of the world based on emptiness with substance, exactly opposite to the dogma of emptiness without substance after having completely overturned from the bottom by using the same Buddhism terminology. That is why the deciphering of the Heart Sutra is worthy in human history. It is also quite a sensational and meaningful scripture, able to overturn the common sense of modern people who live in the dogma of materialism regarded as scientism. Anyone who tries to decipher the Heart Sutra must firstly interpret these presented three paired phrases correctly and construct a series of meaning without contradiction. One should understand that the deciphering of the Heart Sutra can never be satisfied if this process is avoided. In fact, the author has never come across any document which has clarified this sentence structure in a convincing way. Regarding this point, the author presented logical, detailed answers to all the questions within the body of this text. The author has used his abilities in this field and succeeded in deciphering a dense logical structure within the Heart Sutra by carefully analyzing using a modern logical method. The author will explain the three basic natures, which emptiness originally has, without contradiction, completely deny the dogma of emptiness without substance, and present emptiness as substance itself. The second reason why the Heart Sutra has become so difficult seems because the compilers had concealed the fact that they had introduced new concepts into the Heart Sutra, that is, color, VSSV, abbreviated form of dana, sensing, samna, imaging, samskara, willing, and vijnanani, consciousness, in Sanskrit, and all dharmas. We should focus on the fact that compilers dared not use new terms for the new concept, but used the old terms continuously that had been used in initial Buddhism, that is, color, VSSV, and dharma, after making them redefined. However, as proceeding with decipherment, it will be clarified that the proof of redefinition is properly described in the Heart Sutra. In short, there was certainly the explanation to reveal the fact that the new concept had been introduced. In addition, we should note that nobody has ever noticed this strict logical description in terms of redefinition. On the other hand, the author, through his experience of thesis description in the scientific field, found a law-honored definition and several logical descriptions including a solution to solve it within the composition of arrayed letters of the Heart Sutra, and finally has succeeded in unlocking the seal. In general, there is a large difference between religion and science in terms of methods of text representation. They do not match each other and passing always occurs. However, we can find a universal expression only within the Heart Sutra based on description techniques as those found in scientific articles. If one keeps interpreting logical description of the Heart Sutra carefully, which was represented based on the three basic natures of emptiness and the new concept derived from redefinition, both the overall and detailed picture of the Heart Sutra, which previously seemed so hard and obscured, comes into view brilliantly, rather like a fog clearing up at once. The third reason why the Heart Sutra has become so difficult is, and this might be the essential reason, because the compilers had the intention to seal the Heart Sutra for a certain reason and followed the plan that it would be opened in a later period. Once the seal is unlocked and the mystery is solved, it seems that they disseminated the Heart Sutra systematically so as to unseal the ultimate truth in any later period. Furthermore, it seems that the Heart Sutra uses quite a logical description by excluding a vagueness of terms so as not to modify the meaning even if the language becomes different during the passing of time. The purpose to have made the Heart Sutra so difficult was eventually to seal in both the first and the second reason. It is the most noteworthy that the compilers have introduced the technique of redefinition of several fundamental terms, sealed the truth, and also hid a key that could solve the seal itself in the spell, while the truth was daringly shown within the logicality of the Heart Sutra. In short, they tried to accomplish their long-term purpose by deciphering it 2,000 years later. The truth of the Heart Sutra has been tightly guarded by a precious logic for a long time until today. However, finally it has spectacularly blossomed into an expression of the truth in this age after its dense logicality has finally been deciphered with the consolation of the seal. The time has just come. The author believes that the time has come, and the overall picture of the Heart Sutra has appeared along with the decryption of its difficult logicality. The conclusion of the deciphered Heart Sutra should be a common truth for mankind beyond the framework of Buddhism and is great enough to be the bottom line of human intellectual history. In short, it is not only the restoration of Buddhism but religions over the world. The Heart Sutra is a message to us living 2,000 years later after its compilation, and its content seems to have marvelously predicted the progress of current advanced science. In other words, we have reached the stage at which we are able to understand the real meaning of the Heart Sutra simply because now is the present age when vocabulary has been enriched and logic as an academic discipline has been also established. Moreover, we are able to come to see the tangent point between the cosmos which the Heart Sutra has preached and the one modern physical science is indicating. The author will describe his view in the body text by excluding ambiguity as much as possible and constructing a dense logicality. In particular, what we should note as the key of the seals is written in Chapter 3, Chapter 4, and Chapter 5 of this book, where Kanansama Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva directly speaks to Shariputra. In fact, these sections are exactly the best part in the development of meaning because the precise logic is continuously described. The cosmic structure and relationship between the cosmos and man are written with a beautiful logical expression in these sections. Chapter 1. Compilation of Heart Sutra and its purpose. Busatsamaka Haramita Shinyo. Great teaching of Prajnaparamita preached by Buddha. It is obvious that the Heart Sutra was not preached by Buddha himself because it was compiled several hundred years after Buddha entered Nirvana. Nevertheless, it is described that Buddha preached it without hesitation. There are some kinds of Heart Sutra among original Sanskrit versions which are entitled with Great Prajnaparamita Sutra and they do not have the description that Buddha preached. Probably one reason is that it is obvious from a historical point of view that Buddha did not preach it directly, and another reason is the Heart Sutra has been chanted universally among other religions except Buddhism. However, the author has adopted a version entitled with the sentence Buddha preached in this book, although he agrees that these reasons are as a matter of course. The author concluded that the Heart Sutra should be preached under the name of Buddha, a founder of Buddhism, because the author would like to clarify his standpoint that the Heart Sutra was compiled in order to make Buddhism restore and revive. The intention of the author will naturally become more obvious if one reads through until Chapter 9. What is prajna paramita that passes through the whole scripture? The term prajna paramita, consisting of 6 Chinese characters, appears as many as 6 times. A total of 36 characters are used in merely 278 characters, body text 262 plus title 16 of the Heart Sutra. The exceptional importance of this term is quite comprehensive due to the number of its appearances. According to literature 2, the meaning of prajna paramita in original Sanskrit is the completion of wisdom. However, the content of this term is very profound and can never be explained by such a simple phrase. As explained gradually, prajna paramita is an indispensable concept in order to combine initial Buddhism with Mahayanist Buddhism. To express it more contemporarily and universally, prajna paramita is the keyword in order that the Heart Sutra would be combined and integrated with other historical religions all over the world. Since prajna paramita is such an extremely important term, the author would like to reveal a certain conclusion of this term before proceeding with his interpretation. The cosmos consists of a series of multi-layered structures of similar figures beyond dimensions in both material elements and spiritual ones. The author would like to call this structure the cosmic fractal structure, a new coined phrase named by considering of similarities with modern terms. In order to make the whole unified by resonating with this multi-layered fractal structure beyond dimensions, it is necessary that each layer must resonate with each other. The author also would like to call it fractal resonance to resonate with this cosmic fractal structure, and to call the depth at that time fractal depth. Human life activity, that is developing and expanding within the cosmic fractal structure, is within fractal resonance and includes the view of the world preached in the Heart Sutra. This life activity is called prajna paramita. Humans are beings that can move, develop, and fulfill one's life activity beyond dimensions across the fractal structure. The author will define all of this availability and activity as prajna paramita in the broadest sense. We can conclude that the Heart Sutra has been revived to convey the importance of prajna paramita to the present times. One will be able to understand this book better with an organized meaning if one reads it after being familiar with the overview of prajna paramita, which was revealed in this paragraph, Origin of the Heart Sutra. The compilers of the Heart Sutra, through their experience of deep enlightenment, successfully built a view of the world, and a system of thought based on it, for the purpose of the restoration of Buddhism. However, it was revealed that the new system of thought firstly must deny a part of the prevailing common sense of initial Buddhism that had been introduced in the confusion of Buddhism, and secondly reposition it as a part of Mahayanist Buddhism. It was quite a sensational system of thought for those who believed initial Buddhism to be the absolute truth and have been keeping it. Thus, it is not hard to imagine that they could not possibly accept the revealed truth at the time. Of course, while the compilers of the Heart Sutra certainly denied initial Buddhism, they respected Buddha without denying him expressly. Buddha really wanted to say this. Considering these historical situations, it is not hard to imagine the risk that they assumed at that time, that is, to publish the Heart Sutra at the forefront as a new interpretation that would preach emptiness as substance, because the doctrine of emptiness without substance, descended from confused initial Buddhism, was in its prime at that time. Under these situations, the compilers of the Heart Sutra seem to have determined to inherit the truth only among a quite limited number of people until the time would come, because they judged that the circumstances were still premature to accept this revolutionary truth. That is why they decided to publish the Heart Sutra in the open without any explanation or commentary, after embedding several key terms, which are the basis of system of thought, as spell, that is, making them sealed as code within the Heart Sutra's precise logicality together with its solution. They expected that an experienced person who has mastered Prajna Paramita would appear in one region sometime after the latter degenerate age would finally come in the future. Along this scenario, they made a plan that the experienced person who has mastered Prajna Paramita, under prepared circumstances, would correctly read the essence of Mahayanist Buddhism, which is composed of the large-scaled view of the world, from the precise logical structure of the Heart Sutra, by analyzing it in detail accurately, and would surely announce it. In this way, they carried out this plan to revive the Heart Sutra 2,000 years in the future. In other words, they entrusted these present times with the restoration of Buddhism. To tell the result, the unsealed content of the Heart Sutra is amazing, and its coverage is beyond the restoration of Buddhism. Mainly based on the short version of the Heart Sutra translated into Chinese by Tripitaka Master Xuanzang, the author would like to try to decipher the Heart Sutra, referring to the long version of the Heart Sutra as well, sometimes going back to the original version written in Sanskrit. The following is the description interpreted by the author using modern terms, superimposing his experience on the essence of the Heart Sutra. Cited document. Literature 2. Why not read the Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra once in Sanskrit original? Written by Mr. Masaru Osaki, published by Journal of Humanities and Sciences, Nihon University 19 1-2, 41-59, December 2013. Chapter 2. Introductory Part and Purpose Description. Kanji Zabosatsu, Gyojin Han Naihara Mitaji, Shoken Gan Kaiku, Doas Saiku Yaku. When noble Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva Kannon-sama was engaging in the practice of his deep meditation of Prajna Paramita, the perfect highest peerless wisdom, he perceived that phenomenon and event were developing and expanding in 5 skandhas, that is, in the world which human beings live in. Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva is called just Kannon-sama in Japan. Although the origin of the name is not clear, Kannon-sama has been spoken to for a long time among Buddhists as a symbolic existence of saving sentient beings. This book follows this story, and the author will describe Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva as Kannon-sama. First of all, readers of this book should notice that the terms phenomenon and event are used referring to different concepts in this book. In other words, event is matter with some interpretations that is generated by adding a human-like meaning onto phenomenon as objective facts. Moreover, event is a unique and specific world of each person generated by each human impression or interpretation. However, everybody thinks that it is common without regarding it as a unique or specific world. This seems strange to the author. In other words, one is not a being that lives within mere physical meaning called phenomenon, but is a being that lives exactly within event, which will be newly produced by one's interpretations when one is involved in phenomenon. We can conclude that man is a being who tries to find the most important meaning not within phenomenon itself but within one's own unique event. Kannon-sama, as deepening his meditation of Prajna Paramita, also perceived that the world of impermanence and vanity of all things certainly has no substance. However, there were in reality the principles of the cosmos authoritatively at the root of this world. Furthermore, he determined that the principles of the cosmos has been beautifully expressed forming a fractal structure within phenomenon and event, and everything without any exceptions was necessary, inevitable, and was affirmed completely. Kannon-sama called such a state all-like emptiness the substantiality of all forms of existence of the world, in which human beings live, were completely controlled and systematic in order under the principles of the cosmos. The compilers' names were unpublished. The stage setting in this chapter is that Kannon-sama is preaching the teachings of Prajna Paramita to Sariputra, Buddha's first disciple. However, this is a fictional story. We should understand the true story that the compilers preach the Heart Sutra within fractal resonance transcending time and space at the age of the compilation, in which Buddha, Kannon Sama, and the compilers stayed together in a consistent attitude with consistent policy throughout the Heart Sutra. The compilers, who have attained awakening, realized the principles of Prajna Paramita to represent the view of the world and preached the scripture under the name of Buddha with their name and published for the purpose of restoration of Buddhism. After that, they focused on making people to devote themselves to Kannon Sama, who is a role of salvation, and to be actually saved. The author of this book also takes role sharing to decipher the Heart Sutra through his awakening in the present times. Tripitaka Master Xuanzang also went over to India at the risk of his life and translated the Heart Sutra into Chinese more realistically with his whole heart through his own enlightenment to have conveyed Chinese version to the author after an extensive spreading. This was his role sharing. The compilers have not published their own name, devoting themselves to their role precisely because they do value universality the most beyond the times and religions. We can find many suggestions in their policy which the present confused religions must learn. Gradually, the greatness of the compilers of the Heart Sutra will become apparent with the progress of its decipherment and clarification of its concept. Examine the meaning of 5 skandhas in initial Buddhism. 5 skandhas meant 5 elements that consist of rupam, color, vijnana, sensing, samna, imaging, samskara, willing, and vijnanani, consciousness. Historically, there were 2 meanings. Originally, 5 skandhas had the meaning of physical body and mental process. However, a new meaning was born as the world and mental process after the development of the original meaning. We can find these 2 kinds of translation in the past references or translated books. In this book, the author would like to define 5 skandhas as the second meaning, that is, the world and mental process. Furthermore, the author concluded that 5 skandhas should be treated to the last as a term that belonged to initial Buddhism because they are out of the rule of redefinition, which will be explained in detail later. In other words, the term 5 skandhas in initial Buddhism means the world of impermanence and vanity of all things without substance. This definition of the term 5 skandhas is the corrected place, which is largely different from one in my previous books. However, this is only a matter of redefinition, hence the total meaning of this phrase is not different at all in both new and old redefinitions because the author has always explained 5 skandhas combined with the meaning of all like emptiness. Regarding the meaning of all like emptiness, it is translated as no substance in almost all the translations. For example, it is written in Literature 1 that perceived that 5 skandhas were all empty. In Literature 2, it is written that saw through that they were emptiness in their original nature. Both translators are wrong as far as they have such an interpretation that emptiness has no substance. Even the superficial grammar is correct. In short, carefully checking the structure of the scripture, we can find that all like emptiness will appear as an adjective form sunyan in the original Sanskrit version of the noun emptiness, which will be defined in detail later. In other words, we must translate all like emptiness as an adjective of emptiness, which will be defined as a noun in the coming Chapter 3, Chapter 4, and Chapter 5. It is impossible to translate the meaning of all like emptiness properly before the definition of emptiness. According to the author's further examination of Literature 2, the meaning of each term that is described with emptiness is original nature, entity, autism, or autonomy, and these meanings are missing in the Chinese version. If we introduce the real definition of emptiness and also emphasize that all like emptiness is an adjective of emptiness, the following interpretations become possible. Expressly, we identified that 5 skandhas are existence controlled under emptiness, that is substance. We saw through that 5 skandhas are entity like emptiness under the real existence, or we regarded that 5 skandhas are existence filled with emptiness, which exists autonomously by itself. Readers should be able to read these interpretations smoothly without resistance if they know that emptiness, which will be strictly defined later, is existence with substance. On the other hand, however, the concept that emptiness is substance could never be accepted absolutely at the time of compilation of the Heart Sutra, rather in a sense until today. That is why such a brittle interpretation as emptiness has no substance was introduced. Even today, this big error has resulted in covering the Buddhist world dominantly. What should be called the latter days of this world without telling this situation? Therefore, the author has made his interpretation with valuing the meaning of sunyan, that is, an adjective term in the original Sanskrit text derived from emptiness, a noun which will be defined later. In short, the meaning that 5 skandhas are all like emptiness is expressly, the world of impermanence and vanity of all things without substance in initial Buddhism is under the control of emptiness and is in the state completely filled with energy of emptiness. The explanation of description that 5 skandhas are all like emptiness is still insufficient, however, it is all what the author can explain in this chapter. The author will explain it again in Chapter 5 and later where all the relevant definitions would appear all together. Kannon Sama presented the way of salvation for sentient beings based on this observation as follows. Kannon Sama comes to appear here as a guardian spirit. Described in detail later, the existence of guardian spirits is inevitable for one to develop and expand one's life activity. One cannot do anything without the protection of guardian spirits. In short, the meaning that 5 skandhas are all like emptiness is expressly, the world of impermanence and vanity of all things without substance in initial Buddhism is under the control of emptiness and is in the state completely filled with energy of emptiness. The explanation of description that 5 skandhas are all like emptiness is still insufficient, however, it is all what the author can explain in this chapter. The author will explain it again in Chapter 5 and later where all the relevant definitions would appear all together. Kannon Sama presented the way of salvation for sentient beings based on this observation as follows. Kannon Sama comes to appear here as a guardian spirit. Described in detail later, the existence of guardian spirits is inevitable for one to develop and expand one's life activity. One cannot do anything without the protection of guardian spirits. In short, the existence and work of Kannon Sama as a guardian spirit has been clarified by Tripitaka Master Xuanzang, who added a phrase "will be saved from all problems and suffering" on the Chinese version of the Heart Sutra. We should note that this is a great addition for the origin of the Heart Sutra. The introductory part of the Heart Sutra has been shown here. According to the long version of the Heart Sutra, we can realize that this chapter is a virtual story that Kannon Sama answered questions from Sariputra during the meditation of Prajna Paramita led by Buddha. The following chapters are written by direct quotation of Kannon Sama. Cited document. Literature 1. What is the Heart Sutra? From Buddha to Mahayanist Buddhism, version 4. Written by Mr. Keiichi Miyamoto and published from Shunjusha Company on the 20th of February 2005.